Hi, guys. We are looking at New Answers number 20. And the question that's presented is: did Jesus say that he created the earth in 6 literal days? So, what we're going to do is just kind of look at what the Bible says about that. We're going to start with some New Testament stuff, okay? And in the New Testament, Jesus makes some interesting statements about this, and I'll talk about them a little bit. Well, first, let's start with Mark 10, verse 6. It says, "But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female." So he, talking about Adam and Eve, existed from the very beginning. And since they are able to trace their ancestry back through the Bible, it is essentially saying Jesus is teaching a young creation. Mark 13:19 also shows man's suffering state started near the beginning of creation. Luke 11:50 and 51 talks about Abel and how he was close to the beginning of creation. And again, we can trace his ancestry back through the Bible. So those are just some interesting statements that Jesus says that truly highlights that he was teaching about a young earth, a young creation earth. Also, in the New Testament, Jesus referred to the Old Testament several times and treated the Old Testament history as fact, okay? In Matthew 19:3-6, it says the Old Testament, it said Adam and Eve were the first married couple. In Luke 11:50 and 51, it says Abel was the first prophet killed. Matthew 24, verse 38-39, it talks about Noah and the flood. In John 3, verse 14, Jesus talking about the Moses and the serpent in the wilderness. In Luke 17:28-32, he's talking about Lot and his wife. In Matthew 10, verse 15, he's talking about the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then in Luke 4:25-27, he's talking about the miracles of Elijah. And also in Matthew 12:40-41, he's talking about Jonah and the whale. And when you look at these, your book says on page 257, it says, as New Testament scholar John Wenham has compellingly argued, Jesus did not allegorize these accounts, but took them as a straightforward history, describing events that actually happened, just as the Old Testament described them. The book goes on and says, these passages taken together strongly imply that Jesus took Genesis 1 as literal history describing creation in 6 24-hour days. We also talked about in Colossians 1, verse 16 and 17, how Jesus created all things. And he did so just simply by speaking. Jesus spoke everything into existence, as it says in Psalms 33. The New Testament also confirms this, okay? It talks about, Jesus' very first miracle where he turned water into the wine. And this was where he revealed his glory as the creator. He also... in Mark 4:35-41, he has the calming of the waters and the waves. And there's other miracles that he has done where he simply speaks and it happens. And so the book says, so it was with all of his miracles. He did not speak and wait for days or weeks or months or years for things to happen. He spoke and it was done. So when he said, let there be light, etc. in Genesis, it did not take long ages for everything to come into existence. It didn't take, millions of years for his word to eventually come true. It happened in an instant, just like everything else that he did in the New Testament. So Jesus is called the Word, and the Bible talks about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so it just shows that he was there at the beginning. He speaks, and it happened. Exodus 20, verse 1, it says, and God spoke all these words, saying, and he talks about the 10 commandments, etc. There's also, in your book, it says, there's no doubt, with rare exceptions, that the pre-incarnated Christ did the speaking to Adam, to Noah, to the patriarchs, to Moses, etc., etc. There's no doubt about it. And finally, in Exodus 20, verse 11, it says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Your book says this: Jesus said clearly that he created in 6 days. And he even did something he didn't do with most scriptures. He wrote it down himself. How clearer and more authoritative can you get than that? Thanks.